Okay, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, we're here for two bills today. Council Bill 23-0374, Sale of Property 707 East 34th Street, and Council Bill 23-0400, Port Covington Community Benefits District Amendment Boundaries. Mayor Costello, Councilman from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined to my far right by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District member of the committee. To my left, Councilman Robert Stokes, Vice Chair of the committee. Councilman Isaac, 12th District, Councilman Isaac Gitzi Schleifer, 5th District member of the committee, and Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. To my immediate right is Marguerite Curran, staff to the committee. We also have representatives on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott and Council President Nick Mosby with us today. We will jump into Council Bill 23-0374, Sale of Property 707 East 34th Street. I will turn it over to the sponsor of the bill, Councilwoman Ramos, for brief introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for taking the time on this bill. This bill authorizes the city to sell 707 East 34th Street to a development team. This building is the old Waverly Middle School. Some of us know it as the Venable School as well, because it was the old Venable School. It is a pretty big building that has been vacant for a long time after the Waverly Elementary Middle School was built. The land is actually the school building as well as a portable building. The portable building will be demolished, and the building itself will be made into apartments. This has been a very long process with the community. There have been a couple of RFP processes that didn't work out the way we wanted them, and so finally we believe we have the right project. You'll note in an email I sent to all of you the community support for this effort, and we ask for your favorable report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We will jump into agency reports. We'll take questions from the committee, and I understand we have a community leader who will be speaking on behalf of the bill. Let's start with the Law Department, approved for form and legal sufficiency.
Good morning, Teresa Cummings here on behalf of the Law Department. The Law Department stands by the bill report and approves the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Cummings. Department of Planning, favorable.
Good afternoon, Caitlin Audette here at the Department of Planning. The department stands behind the report in support of the bill.
Thank you. Department of Housing and Community Development, favorable.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Director of Legislative Services for DHCD. I just wanted to acknowledge that we have with us today Tony Badon, our Director of Project Development from our Development Division, and Kelly Barcala, our Neighborhood Development Officer. We do stand by our bill report and echo the Councilwoman's sentiments around the extensive community engagement that went into this process, resulting in the sales ordinance that we see before us today. So we do stand by our bill report and request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Department of Real Estate defers to DHCD.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. Board of Estimates, that'll be submitted to the BOE post-council action in committee. And finally, Department of Finance.
Good morning, Mara James, Assistant Budget Director for the Department of Finance. We do not oppose this legislation. We were able to confirm that this property is under the responsibility of city schools, so there is no operational costs for the city that we have been incurring over this time, and there's no outstanding city debt for this. So we do not expect there to be any costs from the city so far, and we expect increased city revenue as this will go back to the property tax roll.
Thank you. And we have Ms. Karen. If you could come up to the lectern up here. Yep, and just hit the button on the bottom right, and when that turns red, you're good to go. And pull the mic down. Yep.
Yes, I represent Waverly Improvement Association, and we also support the sale of this property to Schreiber Brothers Development. They've met with us extensively, and we'd like to see something happen. It's been vacant for a long time in our neighborhood.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to testify on this bill? Seeing as there's none, colleagues, do we have any questions for our agencies? Okay. We're going to go into a brief recess on this bill as we're waiting for one more member to attend. Councilwoman McCray will be here briefly. So as soon as Councilwoman McCray gets here, we will call this one back into session and take a vote. So we're now in recess on that bill. Next up is Council Bill 23-0400, Port Covington Community Benefits District Amendment Boundaries. I introduced this bill. This bill pertains to the Business Improvement District, or BID, which exists in Port Covington, which was established through council ordinance around 2018. When that BID was established through council ordinance, that was done at the request of the Port Covington Development Team. When that was done, there were a very small number of properties that were not controlled by the development team. One of those being Lock Insulator, which is a company located on, or was located on Insulator Drive, which produced some type of semiconductor widget that would be found in a device that we would purchase for our family at Best Buy. That company made a business decision to no longer operate that production facility in Port Covington, and that property went up for sale last summer of 2022. There were a number of entities, both local and regional, which put in bids, put in offers, not to be confused with bid, for that property, and that property was awarded to a local developer. I've put in an ordinance to remove that property from the bid for a variety of reasons, including but not limited to the fact that, one, that property should have never been included in the bid in the first place. The current property owner would not have any tangible influence on the bid board in order to determine how bid funds would be expended. And finally, it's important to note that that developer specifically has a track record of providing those amenities, many of the amenities which would be covered by the bid at several other communities throughout Baltimore City. So with that, what we're going to do is we will go through our agency reports, then we will take questions from the council, and then we will take public testimony. We will start with the Law Department, approved for form and legal sufficiency.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you. Department of Finance does not oppose.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do not oppose. We just note that with the changing of the boundaries, while there's no direct cost or revenue impact to the city, there's an estimated reduction of about $12,000 to the district's surcharge revenues for fiscal 2024.
Thank you. Planning Commission, favorable.
This was reviewed by the Department of Planning, which recommended approval and stands by the report.
Thank you. Department of Housing and Community Development, no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We stand by our bill report. We do not object to the passage of this bill.
Thank you. Department of Transportation, no objection.
Mr. Chair, Liam Davis, Baltimore City Department of Transportation. We stand by our bill report, no objection.
Thank you. Department of Public Works, no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcia Collins and Janelle Mummy here from Department of Public Works. We do stand by our report, and we have no objection to the passage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Office of Equity and Civil Rights defers to Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Office of Equity and Civil Rights defer to Department of Finance.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions for our city agencies? Okay. Okay, public testimony, Mr. Laria.
Give me a second to organize these things, please.
And we won't be, I'm going to ask that, because we only have 2 folks testifying, that you limit your testimony to we'll say 10 minutes apiece.
I think I can do that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm John Laria of Ballard Spar. We represent Baltimore Urban Revitalization LLC, which is a joint venture of MAG Partners, McFarland Partners, Goldman Sachs Urban Investment Group, and Sagamore Ventures. With me, if you need them, are various representatives of the company. I hope that I can do this without their assistance, but if we need them, they'll be here. I just want to say, well, I'll just start with this. I think everybody knows the team and its predecessors are responsible for what you see built today at Baltimore Peninsula, formerly Port Covington, hence the name of the Benefits District. Chapter 1B of that development, which just came online, includes 440,000 square feet of office, 116,000 square feet of retail, 537 multifamily units, which I might also point out includes 89 affordable housing units with income restrictions from 30% to 80% of area median income. The neighborhood also includes a new global headquarters for Under Armour, which is under construction. We'll soon join a longstanding Under Armour presence in the community, and in cooperation with many partners, including and especially the city, and most especially, frankly, the chairman, Councilman Costello, whose district it is, Baltimore Peninsula has become a real neighborhood that's projected to grow to 14 million square feet, one of the largest urban redevelopment initiatives in the country. The City Council created the Port Covington Community Benefits District in May of 2020 to allow property owners to make a supplemental tax payment to augment city services. And the district is similar to other community benefits districts like Charles Village and Midtown, as well as business improvement districts like Downtown Waterfront and York Road Corridor. Now, these districts are not private creatures. They require an ordinance and a vote of majority of property owners who would be subject to the district assessment. It's a rigorous process with full Board of Estimates engagement and oversight. The BOE approves the district, it approves the directors, it approves the bylaws, it approves the budget. So this is not something happening sort of over there. It's happening with full city engagement and involvement, and the board, of course, has approved all of these actions. So today, the bill before you is superficially simple. It moves a district boundary line, and it carves the Lock Landing project, including 389 townhouses and 420 multifamily units, out of the district. It originated, as the councilman said, from a request by a private developer to be removed from the district because it doesn't want to pay the district tax. And this is despite the fact that the district was created by ordinance in May of 2020, over 2 years before the current owner bought the Lock property, so 2 years of notice. Our position is different. Our position is based on principles of fairness and shared responsibility. We see the district as a neighborhood with shared amenities and services, and we think it's only fair that the cost of building and maintaining those amenities are supported by those who benefit from them. The district amenities are significant, and I will not give you the full list. It would be in the written testimony. The list would be extensive, but just so you have it, I'm holding for you this. This is the existing boundary. There are some blue lines, and this will be in your package as well. There are some blue lines that indicate public roads that are getting sidewalks, planting beds, and so on. There are some green public parks. This, frankly, underrepresents the number of public parks because there will be acres and acres of public parks when the property is built out. And again, I don't want to waste my time or yours by listing all of the things that are going to that they're going to do at the district. But it is snow removal, painting, power washing, sweeping leaves, cleaning benches, litter, et cetera, emptying trash cans, graffiti removal. It's landscaping, mowing, trimming all the grass, edge and curbs, turf maintenance, debris removal, pruning, all those kinds of things that you know that community benefits and business improvement districts do. Also, events and promotions, family-friendly events in the district for residents and visitors, promoting and publicizing events, concerts, movies, et cetera, and also security to augment what BPD is able to do in this large area. So Lock Landing is obviously part of the Baltimore Peninsula neighborhood. The city considers it part of the Baltimore Peninsula neighborhood, and I guess if you want some evidence of that, especially for the record, here's the neighborhood statistical area map from the planning department, and here is Baltimore Peninsula. The neighborhood, according to the city, Baltimore Peninsula includes Lock Landing and what people think of previously as sort of the Port Covington development. Also, find you this image. That's all right. I'm afraid of these. This is a very nice image of the full build-out of Port Covington, Baltimore Peninsula eventually. So many of the buildings in the back are not yet built, but they're permitted under the master plan. Of course, you probably have been there at this point. If you haven't, let us know, because we'd like to show it to you. But you have what are called Chapter 1A buildings here. This, of course, in the foreground is the Under Armour campus, and that is Lock Landing. That's townhouses and 2 multifamily buildings. It's part of the neighborhood. It's fundamentally part of the neighborhood. It's connected to the neighborhood. So it's hard to understand the idea that it should somehow be separating itself. And perhaps more importantly, if you don't like those images, Lock itself seems to think it's part of the neighborhood. Marketing materials from the Lock Landing website feature numerous amenities within the broader Baltimore Peninsula, and these are also included, but I'll describe them. These are the boards from the website for marketing for the townhomes, and I'll just paraphrase a few things. Commute with ease, enjoy a bike and pedestrian-friendly area with cycling and walking network throughout. Here's a vibrant mix of activities and retail with an image of the Phase 1 at Baltimore Peninsula. It says, head over to Rye Street Tavern, an award-winning Sagamore distillery. Here's another one with an overview highlighting the Lock project. It says, year-round access to waterfront property, promenades, and piers. Get active on 40-plus acres of outdoor recreation. Shop at local favorites. Live within a thriving destination. It's their own marketing materials. And then, and if you'll permit me, Mr. Chair, and this might be very hard for me to do technologically because I'm aging quickly, but I want you to see, as the best I can do, we'll include these. This is the Lock Landing webpage. And I guess I have to see it. So if you go to the Lock Landing webpage, you get this scroll that includes the Under Armour campus. Sorry, I can't speed it up. It'll come around. Waterfront shopping, same image. Sagamore Spirit Distillery. Entertainment. And again, the same materials. Why should Lock Landing residents benefit from neighborhood amenities and not have the responsibility to help pay for them? Now, in addition to fundamental fairness questions, there's a giant precedent problem here. Why would we treat differently literally identical uses in the same city, let alone the same neighborhood? The existing buildings at Baltimore Peninsula have 537 multifamily units. Why should they contribute and Lock doesn't? What's the distinction? As an aside, those other multifamily, as I said at the beginning, have 89 income-restricted units. So it's 89 income-restricted units in buildings that are paying the benefits district assessment. Lock has no affordable units, and it's going to be excused. And what about future projects throughout Baltimore Peninsula? How do we tell them that they need to pitch in when everybody knows Lock was excused? Next, and I'll conclude shortly, Mr. Chair, next, are you going to remove properties from similar districts whenever a property owner asks? The city has never removed a property from a district before. It's only added them, Fells Point recently and some others. This would be a first. How will the city, the council, and the council members explain to those owners that they're not entitled to be removed when everybody knows that Lock may have been removed? And finally, just so that members know, we've been working on this for a long time, trying to resolve this. We have tried to compromise, despite our serious concerns. Most importantly, we've agreed, my client has agreed, to some extent against my recommendation, that 389 townhouses at Lock Landing can be removed. So that's, remember, Lock Landing, townhouses plus multifamily buildings. We've said, all right, why? Especially when the townhouses were expected to account for well over half the payments that were originally budgeted for Lock, over $300,000. But Councilman Costello, respectfully, and we obviously been trying to work with and honor his concerns, the councilman's convinced us that since single-family homes are somewhat less common in these districts, they should be removed. And in the interest of fairness and compromise and equity and all those things, we've agreed that we can remove the townhomes, but not the multifamily. And we have two versions of an amendment to achieve that compromise today. I'll share them with you, one of which is very simple. It just moves the line. That's easy. The other is a little bit more complicated because it provides a waiver for the townhouses. It keeps them in, but provides a waiver. And I'm sure I don't have time, and you probably don't want to hear right now why that might be preferable. But either of those would effectively take the townhouses out. But we're prepared to discuss both. As for removing the multifamily, we just can't agree. As I noted earlier, there's existing multifamily housing, including affordable housing that's in the district. There will surely be more multifamily, and we, and most respectfully you, don't want an exemption request every time someone learns that you exempted Locke in 2023, which is exactly what's going to happen. It's really just a bridge too far. It's a bad precedent, and it really doesn't have any basis in policy. So we've asked the sponsor, we're opposed to the bill, not surprisingly, but we've also asked the sponsor to consider delaying today's hearing so that the affected parties could continue to negotiate an equitable solution without the city getting entangled. And at the very least, if the committee is not prepared to issue an unfavorable report, we ask you to delay at least the vote to permit further negotiation. So thank you very much. And Councilman, I do have a couple of comments to respond to the specific things you mentioned, but I don't want to take any more time. I'm happy to do that, but I also want to be responsive to the things that you
welcome.
mentioned.
You're welcome to.
Shall I continue? Just
And
take
if
another
you
few
could
minutes.
drop off the written amendments.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You know, it's been an unusual road here. I think it's true that no one knew what was going to happen with the Locke property, which, as you'll remember, those of you who've been down to Port Covington in its prior incarnation to Nix know that the Locke building was there, big industrial building. Councilman has suggested the property should never have been included. We respectfully differ. There's no, again, to us, it's about proximity, upside-down proximity. It's about proximity and fairness. I don't know what it means precisely to say that it never should have been included. The point is, it's there, it was included, and it's fair for it to be included. I mean, it's a matter of what makes sense, and when you look at this image, it's hard to understand how that property should somehow be excluded, whatever the original purpose was. Regarding information, I have notes here, Councilman. Property owner would not have influence on the bid board. Well, I mean, it is certainly true that the CBD board, which was also approved by the Board of Estimates, has I think it's 12 members, and those members include, as the law requires, a variety of people. It does not have, at current, a representative from Locke, because when we offered the opportunity to have a representative from Locke, they failed to respond. The offer is still open. We'd have to move some seats around, but it's certainly doable. And we think it's totally equitable for Locke, being as significant as it is, to have a representative or representatives on the CBD board. It's totally feasible if we would just engage on the subject. But it's unfair to say that they don't have access to that board. Do they have a controlling interest in the board? Of course not. I mean, they're not going to have a controlling interest, but they're going to have a seat at the table, which is really what we're talking about. And then finally, the councilman asked the question about the developer having a track record of providing amenities. We all know the developer. I have a lot of respect for the developer. The developer has a great track record of providing amenities that would be in his projects. Those amenities are going to be provided inside Locke Landing, and he should do it, and he's going to do a great job. We are talking about, I have that other, I'm going to lose that board.
That's by Liam.
Sorry. So, Locke Landing, I'm sure it's going to be fabulous. The point is, it's everything else outside Locke Landing. It's everything else. It's all the roads that lead to Locke Landing. It's all the landscaping that leads to Locke Landing. It's all the amenities that help Locke Landing. That's what we're paying. So in this discussion, people have said, oh, there's going to be an overlap. There's no overlap. We're not doing anything inside Locke Landing, and Locke Landing doesn't have responsibility for anything outside of Locke Landing. They're completely complementary. So the developer is terrific, and we'll do a great job inside that project. By the way, go down there. It's going to be an incredible project. Thousands of people are going to come to Baltimore Peninsula. But it is going down this path of who's going to provide what. That's right. They're not going to provide services outside, and the Community Benefits District is not going to provide services inside. That's the way it's designed. But you have to admit, when you look at it, it's hard to imagine how Locke Landing is not going to benefit from these broader services that are provided, and they acknowledge it too, because I've now shown you 3 versions of their marketing materials. So that's what I have. We are more than happy to engage in this discussion. I regret, frankly, that it has to happen in the venue of a city council hearing. I do wish and hope that, and I think that we can resolve it, which is frankly one of the reasons why we would prefer to have a delay and not have you go forward. And that's the request we're making. We would love not to have the bill at all, but at the very least, we'd love for the bill not to go forward today so we can continue the discussion. But I really appreciate the opportunity to explain to the committee what's going on, what the context is, and again, to make the pitch that this is about equity, fairness, and neighborliness, and shared responsibility. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ilaria. We may come back for questions. I want to introduce, we've been joined by Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee. Councilwoman Ramos, we're going to come back. I just don't want to interrupt this conversation, but I know the committee is fully in support of your bill, so we will handle that item today. Ms. Hecker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I just have...
And Mr. Ilaria, can you give us your amendments, or you said you had a proposal? Thank you. When you get a chance, no rush.
No, take your time. Go ahead.
Okay, so real quick, colleagues, we're going to get, so you've got the package from Ms. Hecker. Now you're going to get the package from, please, you're going to get the package from Mr. Ilaria. And then in addition to that, you're going to get 2 proposed amendments from Mr. Ilaria. Marguerite's handing out the package from Mr. Ilaria right now. Take it away, Ms. Hecker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Caroline Hecker, Rosenberg, Martin Greenberg, on behalf of Insulator Drive LLC, which is the developer of the new Lock Landing property. The principal is Mark Saperstein, who many of you know. He's done many projects throughout the city, and I appreciate the councilman's words about his excellent track record throughout the city. I also appreciate the Councilman Costello's efforts in convening meetings between us and the development team at Port Covington to try to resolve this in advance of this hearing. Like Mr. Ilaria, I regret that this has come down to a contested hearing today, but unfortunately, we're not able to agree to an amendment that results in the Lock property, either the townhouse portion or the apartment buildings remaining in the bid district. The purpose of this bill is to allow the former Lock Insulator property to be redeveloped for residential use. The developer is proposing a huge residential redevelopment in a former industrial site, resulting in over 800 new residential units. It's apartments, it's townhomes, it's condominium units. It represents several $100 million in capital investment in the city, all of which is privately financed. It includes the construction of a 3-acre public park along the waterfront. All of the public infrastructure, all of the infrastructure is privately financed, including the roadways, the utilities, the landscaping. This is going to bring over 1,000 new residents to the Baltimore Peninsula. We're very excited about it. But in order for the development to proceed, we are requesting an amendment to the boundaries of the Port Covington Community Benefits District to remove this property, which, as Councilman Costello indicated, never should have been included in the first place. As you all know, Port Covington is being developed with the assistance of a $660 million TIF that was approved by the City Council in 2016, which will fund the construction of public infrastructure within the boundaries of the TIF district. In connection with the TIF, Sagamore entered a memorandum of understanding with the city under which it committed to fund the ongoing landscaping, lighting, and maintenance for the public lands within the TIF district. Then in 2020, Sagamore established the bid. The bid created the funding source for these obligations that Sagamore had committed to in this MOU, as well as the security that it would provide in marketing expenses within the rebranded Baltimore Peninsula. In essence, the bid shifts the burden to the property owners within the TIF district, within the bid district, excuse me, rather than Sagamore. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with this arrangement, and the creation of the bid might have made sense if the boundaries of the bid district matched the boundaries of the TIF district, but they don't, and that's what I've handed out to the committee members. The TIF district, which is the first map that you'll see in the packet that I handed out, includes all of Port Covington except the Lock Insulator property. This means that the Lock property was not eligible for TIF funds to construct the roads, the parks, and the other public infrastructure. All of that is being privately financed in this development. So when the Sagamore talks, or the MAG talks about it being fundamentally part of the same neighborhood, yes, except that it's not getting the benefit of the TIF funds. The second map that's in the packet that I handed out is the bid district, which interestingly includes the Lock property, but excludes the Under Armour campus. So this means that while Lock isn't getting any of the benefits of the TIF funds, it still has to fund the ongoing maintenance, landscaping, security, marketing expenses within the broader TIF district, which it's not a part of. And Under Armour is exempted from all of that. Now, what we've heard is that it's fundamentally unfair to allow a property to be removed. It sets a dangerous precedent. You know, what about other owners that come to the city council in the future and want to be exempted or removed from a bid? And that this was done properly through a very public process involving the city council and the Board of Estimates. This is all a red herring. We're not arguing that it's inappropriate to include residential properties generally within bids. All we're arguing is that it's inappropriate to include this property in this bid. There are no other similarly situated properties, and it doesn't set any kind of precedent. There are no other properties that are not part of the TIF, but that are part of the bid. Normally, when you're establishing a bid, you have a group of property owners who get together and decide that the level of services they're receiving from the city is inadequate and that they want to levy a tax upon themselves so that they can subsidize these city services and provide services on their own within their geographic area. It's an established community. They're going to agree that they're going to provide these supplemental services themselves. In this case, however, the Port Covington bid was established by one master developer who controlled almost all of the land within the area. At the time, the Lock property had closed, the manufacturing operation had closed in, I think, 2017. It was vacant. It was owned by a company based in Japan that frankly wasn't paying attention to what was going on the Baltimore Peninsula. And as Mr. Leary indicated, they failed to respond to whatever notices were sent out to them. Mr. Saperstein, the owner of the Lock property, had no vote in the establishment of the bid, and when he purchased the property last fall in September of '22, all he knew was that the bid had been established, but it had been established a couple of years before, and nothing had happened. The bid they hadn't set the supplemental tax, they hadn't set a budget. He had no way of knowing what the financial impact was going to be on the Lock Landing property. Once the bid's budget was released, however, it became clear that the bid was intended to fund the things that the Lock Landing project is already doing. The residential development's going to be part of an HOA. The HOA is going to fund all of the landscaping, maintenance, security, lighting, the snow removal, all the things within the Lock Landing project, and the same with the apartment building, which will be subject to a declaration of covenants. They're already paying for these things, these services. So why should they have to pay twice, essentially? Why should they have to pay for the broader Port Covington community, particularly when they're not within the same TIF district? Mr. Saperstein also developed McHenry Row in Locust Point, where the Harris Teeter is located. This would be like him deciding, he's totally built this whole project with roads and streets and whatnot within McHenry Row, but now he's going to levy a tax on the residents of Locust Point to pay for it. It doesn't make any sense. So for all of these reasons, in fundamental fairness, the bid's boundaries really should match the TIF's boundaries. And while we're not suggesting that the Under Armour campus be added to the bid, we think it's only fair that the Lock Landing site come out of the bid so that they can provide their own services, which they're already planning to provide, and aren't subject to this double taxation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hecker. Again, as a reminder to our colleagues, we have 4 artifacts in front of us. First is a package from Mr. Laria. Second is a package from Ms. Hecker. And then third and fourth, we have 2 proposed amendments from Mr. Laria. Colleagues, do we have any questions? Councilman Schleifer.
Hey, Thank you for both the presentations. I mean, I've just some clarifying questions because this project is new to me, and if you look at this map, the blue skyline over there, that's my district, so it's the furthest point of the city. So I'm not well-versed on what's going down at the other side of the world here. But with this map that you show that's here, can you just explain a little bit more, or either side, I mean, you, John, doesn't matter. All these properties here, are they all owned by the same person? And then this is just the one that's the odd one out?
Most of them within that yellow line are owned or controlled by related entities, except for the Locke property, and I think there's probably a handful of others. I think BGE may own a property or two. There may be one or two other property owners. Mr. Laria can probably address that better than I can. Most of them, though, were owned or controlled by related entities.
Can we do, real quick, Ms. Hecker, if you could take the vice president's seat right here, and Mr. Laria, if you can take Councilwoman Ramos's seat right here, just because I feel like there may be some back and forth, and just to make it more convenient. Yep, please and thank you. She was closer.
So on this map here, these other entities that have properties on it, are they subject to, why don't we back up? Can you explain how this calculation works as to what properties are currently assessed what in the big picture? I mean, John, you did a great job at explaining what is included and what it's funding, but how that, how that formula was created, like who's supposed to be paying what?
Oh, thank you. Councilman, the district contemplates that the district authority, which is the entity that runs it, is able to assess a surcharge. And, I'm sure you're familiar with that in other districts, even if they're not in your, and coincidentally my district in Northwest Baltimore. So the charge is 19 cents per $100 of assessed value. That number was arrived at by a budgeting process that went up to and was approved by the Board of Estimates. So it's been vetted. It didn't get, at some point it starts with, like anything else, some sort of assumptions. And people say, what about this, what about that? And at the end of the day, it came out to be 19 cents a square foot. That number is totally subject to adjustment. And, if it's a balance. As Baltimore Peninsula gets bigger, that will mean more expenses, but it will also mean more taxpayers. So the idea is that the budget gets revisited. The number hopefully will go down. But at the moment, the balance was struck at 19 cents per $100 of assessed value.
So 19 cents at $100 of assessed value. And so what was when that factor when that formula was created, what was going to be happening on this project, on this property, this Locke property?
When the formula was created, it was, I think, evident. I have to think about the timing. It was created, the CB, I always say, we have this little internal debate because we say bid reflexively. It's a community benefits district because it's not just business, clearly. But the community benefits district was created in 2020. I think what people probably knew was that Locke in its current form was not long for the world. There were a lot of people interested in it. Everybody sort of knew that that was not going to be whatever Locke insulators, whatever widgets they made, it was not going to go on forever. So I think the assumption was it would be redeveloped. And ultimately, Mr. Saperstein prevailed and is down there working hard to redevelop it for, as you've heard, mostly residential and so on. So I don't know that there was an improved development plan. Others may have more specific information, but it wasn't like some speculative thing like, oh, there might be something like that Locke building, that could be here for a long time. That just wasn't practical. It was very much in the market.
Gotcha. And so is there a reason why the conglomerate as a whole didn't purchase this property? I think, Caroline, you said that it was purchased last fall. So this was a very much active site last fall. So how come the conglomerate didn't purchase it? Because that property seems to be one of the most sizable pieces of property there.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have the power of eminent domain, and it just didn't work out. I mean, and we're very happy. Locke Landing is going to be great. So we're not unhappy with it. We think it's a great opportunity, and the site plan's terrific. We're just disputing this issue about the payments under the CBD.
Gotcha. So as far as the total formula, if this property is excluded, how does that impact the big picture? I mean, is that, who picks up that difference?
Sure. So the current year budget is about $1.9 million. The Locke property in its entirety, and these are, remember, you're making estimates because you've got a property down there that is in the midst of redevelopment, and obviously there'll be reassessments. You have to make some estimate about what the value will be of multifamily buildings and townhouses and so on. I know you're familiar with all that. So you make some estimate, and the assumption is that we'll have to see what happens with the budget. Forgive me, remind me of exactly your.
So I'm saying what happens, so you have a $1.9 million budget.
Oh, yeah. So
you're factoring some percentage of
so
that.
the Locke, I mean, there's a set of numbers, and it's about a $1.9 million budget, of which, Locke is projected, subject to the caveats I just described, to contribute something in the neighborhood of $500,000. And that's divided between the townhomes and the multifamily. In fact, the townhomes are, at least in the budget, projected to do more, which means our offer to compromise is actually giving up more than half of the revenue.
And is that in perpetuity, or that's only until TIF runs out? How does that?
Well, it's nothing to do with the TIF, and I want to comment on the TIF, this sort of TIF district thing, because I think it's actually, it's easy to get on that. I don't think it really, I think it's misleading and confusing. But the answer is these districts do not have perpetual life. They're subject to renewal every 4 years. And if the council were extremely unhappy at that period, which is coming up soon, because remember, in 2024, it's not that far away. So the council could decide not to renew it. I think Councilwoman Ramos was nodding there because she has this Charles Village district that she knows well. So, and there have been in the past, some good arguments about renewal of districts. So if the district's working, council has the prerogative to continue it with the Board of Estimates. If the district's not, presumably you could
So does that include where the lines are drawn in it, or you're just saying the district as a whole?
The whole thing would just go away.
Gotcha.
I mean, it would literally go away. I mean, what the district really is, Councilman, is a boundary with an authority which has been given via the city some delegated power to tax, subject again to the approvals process. And it's a supplemental tax. It goes out from finance on a tax bill, and it's a municipal charge, and just like a tax bill.
So what was the, because I mean, the only property here that I see that seems to be a little larger is the Under Armour property.
Yeah.
So is that already built up at that site?
Under Armour?
Yeah.
Under Armour is under construction right now. It has 2 original buildings that were a Sam's Club and a Walmart, believe it or not, that have been repurposed for Under Armour, and I think the rendering is actually quite accurate, a very large athletic field, and most importantly, construction of the global headquarters, which if you went down there now is a construction site, and I could get you the completion date. I don't know what I'll
Gotcha. So what was the rationale for them not being part of that? Because clearly they're also beneficiaries of everything else wonderful that's going on the property.
Well, it's a good. I'm glad you asked it because it allows me to sort of answer the larger question. Yeah, we've faced this question, over and over again. You look at the map and you think, well, Locke's in and Under Armour's out. The observation I would make is that Under Armour is in the TIF district, as Ms. Hecker said. It is not, no funds were used from the TIF on the Under Armour campus. I think legally they could have been, potentially, but the decision was that Under Armour would not use any of those funds. It is nonetheless in what is called the TIF Special Taxing District. And what that means is it is liable for special taxes, which is to ensure that the debt service on the TIF is paid. As you may know, when TIFs are done, one of the big questions is what happens if we don't have the money to pay the TIF? And the way we've always explained that is to say the city is never really on the hook for that. The city's on the hook for it, but it can assess the property owners who are within a special taxing district. So at the end of the day, the owners are on the hook for it. Under Armour is on the hook and obligated for special taxes for the TIF based upon their property, and I believe is paying approximately $1.5 million this year, and is expected to pay another $1 million for each of the next number of years. I think it's 10 at least, because the it is, the idea is that once the entire property starts to get built out and there's more revenue, et cetera, but for the time being, Under Armour is responsible. So there is some sort of parallel here in that Under Armour basically, by being in the TIF and by making the obligation to special taxes, has helped to facilitate the construction of all of these outside improvements, which benefit them. There's no question that they benefit, just as Lock Landing benefits Under Armour employees can use the common areas, et cetera, et cetera. But Lock Landing, sort of in contrast, has no TIF obligations. So when Ms. Hecker says, you know, they don't get the benefit of the TIF funds, that's true, but that's half the story. The other half of the story is that they don't have any obligation ever to repay any of the TIF money. So Under Armour didn't use the funds on its campus because it agreed not to use the funds on its campus. It has long-term obligations under the special taxing district. Those long-term taxing special obligations are not theoretical because they're paying $1.5 million a year and $1 million for the next number of years. Locke has none of those obligations. However, it seems equitable that Locke should have some contribution. And the way I guess I look at it is Under Armour got the thing built, helped to get the thing built, and Locke can help us maintain it in good order for the foreseeable future. It's not a perfect kind of setup, but it is just and ultimately, I think, equitable. And I would encourage you not to, the idea that somehow, you know, this business about the TIF and the community district being not overlapping is kind of, it's appealing, and you look at the map and it raises the question, but you do have to appreciate the fact that Under Armour is making enormous contributions to Baltimore Peninsula. It's just kind of making them in a different way. Locke is never going to make those contributions, and we're saying, look, instead of those contributions, how about 19 cents $100 so that your folks can enjoy all of these amenities throughout the neighborhood?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I'm just trying to make sense of all of
Please.
it, and so
I'm at your
service. You know, if we separate the conversations, because I understand where you're coming from, that the TIF is a separate conversation, that still, you know, begs the question that in perpetuity, this property would be bound to this 19 cents of assessed value, which I assume that is going to go, I mean, we didn't get there yet, but are these going to be property owners, or is the developer maintaining the property and just renting out the homes? And
The homes will be fee simple townhouses. The obligation will be on the new homeowners to pay the bid fee.
Gotcha. So, and then the same thing with the apartment buildings, or like, is that going to have, is he maintaining, is he going to own those apartment buildings? Or
He'll be selling the apartment buildings to an apartment developer, and they'll be
Gotcha.
responsible for the bid
Gotcha.
fee.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's where the whole conversation of the individual townhomes versus the apartment complex being separate things. So like in the perfect world, John, then if the property's doing as well as we're all hoping that it will, then Under Armour really wouldn't be on, and I do appreciate all the contributions they make to the city, don't get me wrong, but as far as the physical property is concerned, in a perfect world, they wouldn't then be responsible for anything if the property is making up all of the revenue, and then they don't actually have to backstop anything, but then they also don't have to pay this 19 cents, where then these individual, you know, homeowners, people who work at Under Armour who are going to buy those homes, they're going to be on the hook to pay for that. So how do we, I'm just trying to understand how the corporation, right? Like I don't personally have a problem with the apartment buildings being a piece of, you know, that being factored in a different component. We're talking about like the homeowners. We want as many homeowners as we can get. I think it would be cool to have, you know, the employees who work in the peninsula to also own those homes, but then they're basically paying for, you know, their boss's share on it. Whereas if, you know, Under Armour is paying towards that 19 cents, then perhaps they wouldn't be on the hook. You see what I'm saying?
I do, and I, like I said, I can't deliver sort of a perfect solution to this problem. I'm just explaining that people, you know, want to ignore Under Armour's, forget about the question of civic contribution and corporate presence, all of which you've given them credit for, and forget about all those things. But Under Armour is really, the strength of the financial strength of that company enabled this community to go forward. It is theoretically possible. I don't know what the long-term projections are, with respect to the TIF. And Under Armour is on the hook forever to the extent that there's an issue. I don't know how long they'll be on the hook for. I don't know, you know, what will, none of us know really what's going to happen because none of us knows what's going to happen in the economy. So I can't disagree, Councilman, with the idea that theoretically one day Under Armour could be, it'll never be free of its legal special tax obligation. It may just not have to make a payment. It'll never be free of the actual obligation until the TIF bonds are repaid, which is in the distant future. You know, with respect to the community benefits district, again, it's renewable every 4 years. If people aren't happy with it, I'm sure the council will hear about it. And if people don't like it, or if the city, you know, decides it wants to provide the services directly. So I don't know that you can say that the community benefits, I mean, arguably today, Under Armour's obligation is longer term than the benefits district obligation, because the benefits district obligation literally could expire. You could make it expire in about a year. So this would all be a big waste of time, wouldn't it? But regardless, it might go away. Under Armour's is going to go well beyond that. And then once you get beyond that, I don't know, the whole thing becomes so speculative. It's very hard to decide who would be responsible for what.
Gotcha. And just my last question, I guess, on this. Can somebody explain, either one of you, what the breakdown is of this board that makes these decisions that came to this, you know, $1.9 million budget? And where I'm getting at is just some clarity. If I were to purchase a home to live there on this property, I mean, 19 cents is a lot you know, that's pretty, that adds up. I mean, as it is, Baltimore City property tax, in my opinion, is too high, especially as it relates to our surrounding jurisdictions. And so I would be very concerned with purchasing one of these homes if I had to pay this 19 cents. Also, not knowing what it's going to be in the future. So what is that, who's on this board? How is that created? Who oversees that? How does that work?
Do you want me to, either, I mean, you can, forgive me. Okay. The board, sorry? Oh, I was going to do the solicitor is suggesting that we look at the code. And we could do that. The code establishes the structure of the board. I was going to actually go to the resolution that's sort of about who's on the board. But regardless, I mean, the board it's made up of people. I'm sorry, Hillary, maybe you can, if you have it handy.
Yeah, it's section 10-6 of Article 14 of the City Code. So when you guys enacted the Community Benefits District for this area, you listed who you wanted on the board, and the composition is one person appointed by the mayor, each council member in the area within the boundaries of the district is also on the board, a business operator, one resident, 3 people designated by the administrator of the district, and then they have a requirement overall about composition. Once you add all those people up, 2/3 of them have to be owners or reps that are subject to the tax imposed by the title. So basically that excludes BG&E.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said? It excludes?
Well, yeah, so basically you have a composition of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 8-ish people, depending on my math skills. And they're all set out as to who they have to be. 1 has to be a resident, 3 appointed by the administrator, 1, you know, appointed by the mayor, and so on. But 2/3 of that total group must be responsible owners or representatives of those owners who pay the tax. So everybody in the community benefits district by law has to pay the tax unless they're a tax-exempt entity. Think church or, you know. The only other thing that the General Assembly has allowed you to exempt in community benefits districts are public service commissions. So in effect, in this particular instance, I believe Ms. Hecker mentioned there's a couple of properties there that might be owned by BGE. So they would be the kind of people that might be able to sit on the board, but they can't be on the board to the extent that 2/3 of the remaining members aren't taxpayers. So essentially, they don't pay the district tax. Is that making any sense? So 2/3 of the total membership has to be people that pay, and you know the kinds of
So the BGE property on this doesn't pay the
No, by state law, they are not. They can be removed, and the city council removed them. So by state law, the only people that aren't allowed to pay the tax would be people who normally don't pay property taxes, like schools, churches, nonprofits. And you have the option to remove public service companies, and that option was taken for this particular benefits district. So in practice, my understanding from Ms. Hecker and Mr. Ilaria is that, in fact, there would basically be like 1 or 2 BGE properties who are in the district but do not pay the district's supplemental tax.
So do we have the ability as a council to add them back in if we want to?
Theoretically, yeah. But again, every time you change the number of people or the boundaries in the district, you, as the bill report noted, the people left there have to vote to say whether or not they want to be specially taxed. Because remember, they're being taxed in order to give additional services beyond what the city gives. You know, the city's baseline services. So this does not get the city out of safety, trash pickup, you know, water main break, whatever. That this is for services above and beyond, and then they're administered by the administration. They come up with their own budget. It's approved by the board. These are basically all benefit districts. And so no church or school in a benefit district, if they're already tax exempt, are going to pay this tax.
Gotcha. And the last thing, I know this is my second last thing, but those owners, who votes on those?
It's
or who
the
appoints
people
it?
who will be taxed that have to vote. So whether you
So
add
they
a
run like
person,
little mini
remove a
elections
person.
down there?
What?
They can run little mini elections where people can say.
Actually,
they
the
wanna-
Board of Estimates runs it. So the Board of Estimates, under the ordinance for the benefits district, and this is true for all benefits districts, once you set it up, it is not official until you get the proper number, and I think it's 57%-ish, of the people who will be having to pay the supplemental tax must agree to pay it. So this isn't a world of taxation without representation. It's basically, you're already paying your property tax. If you're in the TIF district, you're already on the hook for making up the difference between, you know, making up the TIF bond type payments. That's separate. But then if you're in a community benefits district, you're saying 57% of the owners of the property that will be taxed vote to say that they are okay with that extra tax. And then what they get for it has to be something beyond what the city provides, and then there has to be an MOU to say what that is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Councilman Stokes and then Councilwoman Ramos.
My question is, it's nice to know who's sitting on the board. Who are those persons and what is their time on that particular board? Do anybody have that information? If not, Mr. Chair, that is a request that we get a list of the persons that are sitting on that board and what is their time on the board serving. So first, can anybody tell me not just who's appointed by the mayor and administration, but I need to know some names because you just told us about positions.
Councilman, I do have a list because I have the Board of Estimates approved resolution from earlier this year. I could read all the names to you if you like. They are Mayor's Office, of course, the councilman, business operators, including from Sagamore Spirit and Nick's Fish House. There's a resident, of course, although. Oh, just read the.
I don't. You told us
sure, of course.
the positions. We want the names.
Of course. Yeah. So.
The name and affiliation.
Yeah. Alan Robinson from the Mayor's Office, Councilman Costello, 2 business operators, which are Ryan Norwood from Sagamore Spirit, Carly Utzler from Nick's Fish House. There's a resident, although that resident is currently from the management company at the multifamily, but it specifically says until a resident is identified after move-in. You have to remember that this is happening. But let me finish the list and I'll come back to it. Designated individuals, Jennifer Hearn, MAG Partners Owners Rep for Baltimore Peninsula, Mark Brody, MAG Partners Owners Rep for Baltimore Peninsula, David Smith, the same category, Rob Boydock, Sagamore Ventures, Matt Brown, Owners Rep for City Garage, and Kelly Tamimi, Owners Rep for Bizzuto, again with the same caveat that the owners' reps from the management companies are intended to be replaced by residents. And Councilman, let me just say, there's a cart and a horse problem here, which is the thing has to get up and running, because if you've been down there, you know, these services have to be provided, right? But the board itself, and we have to have a board. And so the board, I think, represents a reflection of who is there and who is eligible, who makes sense to have today. The residents' reps, of course, will be replaced when there are residents. And I just want to make this point very clearly. Lock Landing should have a rep on there. And I don't, you know, this was not, despite what Mrs. Hecker said, if I understood her, this was not talking to Lock in Japan. This was direct communication with the current developer, Mr. Saperstein, and his team that said, look, you guys should have a rep on here. Let's figure this out. And they never, as I understand it, took up that offer. It's not academic, but it's not closed. We can fix that, and we should fix that if they want to engage. There's no question, and I don't know exactly what the process would be. I presume there would be a resolution.
John, I don't mean to cut you off, but
yes,
how long are them persons serving?
I'll have to look at the
Will
bylaws
it be a
quickly.
request?
I
If you
have the
don't-
bylaws, and I'll tell you, I just don't know the answer to that offhand.
Well, Mr. Chair, is that a request? Those persons that's currently sitting on the board, the request is for how long they're serving on the board and when is their time up once they serve their part on the board?
It's a 3-year term, Councilman.
It's 3 years, but
It's a 3-year.
everybody might not be there for the next 3 years, depending on when they were appointed to the board. Am I correct?
It's a 3-year term under the bylaw with all sorts of provisos that the board may establish shorter terms, to have staggered dates. So I think there's flexibility, but I'm just answering your question directly. The bylaws say the term of a director is 3 years, subject to all of the sort of management things like replacing management company reps with residents when they're available, and like putting Lock representatives on this board if they're part of the district, because that offer's been made even though it's not been accepted.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 questions. Oh, I have more, but I'm just going to limit it to 2 questions today. I wonder, and the committee might be interested in a map that actually has all of the boundaries, so what the TIF district boundary is versus what the benefits district boundary is versus what the, you know, because all we have here is, you know, this map that has different pieces to it.
Councilwoman, the exhibit that I handed out had both of those maps. You should, it's not that one, it was 2 pages that were stapled together. The first was the TIF district map, and the second one was the, no, that's not it. The second one was the benefits district map.
Okay, if that was handed out, then it's that one? Okay. Right in here, all right. Well, they're not labeled, so that's why I was wondering what was going on. So this one is the current district map.
That is the TIF district map.
The TIF district map.
Correct.
Right. Well, but there's the community benefits district, there's the TIF district, so I just want to make sure I'm correct. This one is the benefits district
That's
map.
the benefits district.
Okay, great, thank you for that. My second question is, help me out a little bit with the math. So, under the TIF area, the taxes aren't being assessed, right? Because it's because of the TIF.
Right.
Yet they're in the TIF district. So once this is developed, how much is that development or every homeowner paying into? Because they won't be paying taxes. They would be paying into the TIF district.
No, they'll pay regular city property taxes because they're not part of the TIF.
So the Lock district is not.
The Lock district is carved, the Lock property is carved
Oh,
out.
I see.
Yeah, so it's not part of the TIF. So they'll pay regular city property taxes, and then on top of that, they'll pay an additional 19 cents per $100 of assessed
Right.
value.
Okay. That's why I was confused about like where the TIF
Right.
district boundaries are versus the, okay. So my understanding though because I have a community benefits district in my district, is that, our homeowners, basically, and property owners, voted to have the TIF district to provide additional clean and safe. And so I guess because I don't know how this is all going to work, considering that there's, at some point in time, we have to figure out how we're going to get police, fire, and a school down here without taxes coming in. But I guess maybe that's what this is eventually going to get to. So I'm just trying to figure out exactly what is the community benefits district then going to pay for? Is it just additional clean and safe?
It's clean and safe, it's maintenance of the parks, the roadways, additional security, marketing expenses for the Baltimore Peninsula. But I think the point that you made at the beginning was exactly the right one. In your district, property owners got together and decided that they wanted to vote for this. And what we have here is the master developer of Port Covington deciding that they want to create this and that they want to include this additional adjacent parcel that's not part of their overall project that they think should contribute to it because it's next door, essentially. The Lock project is already going to have its own clean and safe services. They're going to have an HOA that's going to cover the landscaping, the maintenance, the snow removal, the security, the lighting. All of that stuff is going to be covered by the homeowners association and a declaration of covenants with the multifamily developer so that all of their services are sort of self-contained. So our position is, why should we have to pay for the additional services provided in the broader bid area when we didn't vote to establish that in the first place? We're doing it ourselves.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you very much.
Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll start off by first saying that I concur with my colleague of the 5th District. I'm way over on the other side, and just kind of listening to, you know, what updates of what's happening in this area is interesting. Very unique area. You know, I am a council member that was at the very beginning when all of this started, the improvement or improvement of the TIF. Civic contribution and partnerships are very important to me, and you know, the city is basically helping and working and have worked hard to help this area be a part of the rest of the city. And I guess I want to know from both entities, tell us and the general public some of those partnerships that have developed and are continually developing. Do you have youth work programs? Do you have what? How has this area been involved with the rest of the world of the city? Anyone can start.
I have high hopes that Locke will do all of those things, but admittedly, it's a construction site at the moment. So I think we can answer it, though, for ourselves. Although it's not going to be me, due respect, and I'd like to ask one of the folks from the company who's more familiar with the day-to-day. I will just generalize, start a while to say that you're familiar, Councilwoman, with the SB7 coalition. You're probably familiar also with the unprecedented $100+ million community benefits agreement that was negotiated in part by Councilman Costello and others in order for the TIF to go forward in whatever year that was, 20, forgive me, I should know, but I don't. So there's, the team has continued to be involved, to be meeting and exceeding the requirements in that document. What I would like to do, even though I will ask this gentleman who I'll introduce in a moment to give you more than I can, is to supplement that with the materials that we provide. We are required under those agreements to report everything that we're doing. Obviously, they're not necessarily coming your way as a councilwoman, not from the district, but there are reporting requirements to the city, the comptroller, who has an audit function for which we're actually paying, and then myriad community benefits under the SB7 umbrella. And maybe, Rob, would you mind? So let me introduce to you, if I might, Rob Boydock. Rob can give you his title and specific connection and try and answer the questions. But I do think at the end of the day, it would be best if you also allowed us to provide you with some additional information, because it's a good story and we'd be happy to tell it. Rob?
Rob, I'm going to ask you to keep it at about 1.5 minutes.
I can do
Please,
that.
and thank you.
Keep it at 1:20. All right, thank you all. My name is Rob Boydek. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations with MAG Partners. We're the lead developer on the Baltimore Peninsula project. And I've also been involved with Sagamore Ventures now for a number of years, so I've been on this project for quite a while. As Mr. Laria noted, we entered into a $135 million plus community benefits agreement and memorandum of understanding with the city back in 2016 when we were going through the TIF process. That MOU requires certain direct financial contributions to surrounding communities, what we call the South Baltimore Six. I sit on the board of the South Baltimore Seven Coalition with representatives from all of those communities. It also requires us to provide at least 20% affordable housing, which we did with our first delivery of our first 1.1 million square feet. Requires us to hire a certain percentage of employees locally, both for construction and ongoing. Requires supplier diversity in hiring on our TIF construction projects, a certain minority and women-owned business threshold, which we met on our first go-around on this Chapter 1B construction. And there's a litany of other things that we committed to give back to the community in partnership with the city and those 6 surrounding communities, as well as Baltimore City at whole.
Thank you. If I could have a request if we could have an update of all of the, all of the things that the other things that he is not mentioning.
Yeah, I think I'm going to defer to John to coordinate that for a briefing for Council Vice President Middleton offline to get a refresher on the project.
Okay.
Thank you.
We would love to do that.
Thank you, Madam Vice
Thank
President.
you.
Colleagues, any other questions? At this, Caroline, if you could be brief.
I wanted to answer the Councilwoman's question in terms of what the Locke property is bringing to the city. It's bringing over 1,000 new residents to Baltimore City. It's a capital investment of several $100 million in Baltimore City, and it's all privately financed. And I appreciate that Port Covington is bringing all of these extensive public benefits, but that's appropriate because, again, they received a $660 million TIF for that project. We're also constructing, though, at our own cost and expense, a 3-acre waterfront public park that'll be open to everyone, not just the residents of Lock Landing. We want that to be an amenity for the city. It's a great site, and we're very excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Colleagues, at this time, seeing as there's no other public testimony. Okay, seeing as there's none, at this time, there are 2 amendments which Mr. Laria has offered up. Committee members are welcome to make a motion if they so wish. Seeing as there are no motions, colleagues, I move the bill favorably. Is there a second? Port Covington, and then we'll go to the sale of property. So we're still on Council Bill 23-0400. I move the bill favorably. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice President Middleton. Costello is a yes. Burnett is absent. Dorsey is absent. Schleifer? Yes. McCray? Yes. Middleton?
Yes.
Stokes? Yes. This bill passes with 5 yeses and 2 absences and moves to second reader at the next meeting of the City Council. We will now call Council Bill 23-0374, Sale of Properties, 707 East 34th Street, back to order. Is there a motion to move the bill favorably?
So moved.
Motion by Middleton. Is there a second? Second by Stokes. Costello is a yes. Burnett is absent. Dorsey is absent. McCray? Middleton?
Yes.
Schleifer? Yes. Stokes? Yes. This bill passes with 5 yeas and 2 absences. This bill moves to second reader at the next meeting of the City Council. We're now in recess. Thank you.